Welcome and thank you for joining today's event, Outperform Your Competition with Content at Scale. I'm Stef Sokolowski, the Managing Director of We Are Amnet, the Americas. We Are Amnet is an offshore creative production agency specializing in delivering high volumes of content at scale. A recent report states that over 70% of companies today have an offshore partner to keep up with increased content demand while managing against shrinking deadlines and budgets. In today's event, we will look to uncover how brands can keep pace and meet consumer expectations with content that not only connects, but converts. We will start with a panel conversation followed by Q&A, and then finish up with a lightning round hosted by Anil Noorani. We have quite the eclectic panel from many industries. We're lucky to have Jim from the IMF representing the public sector. We have Navi joining us from Wish, which is one of the world's largest e-commerce sites. We have Marie representing the travel industry from Norwegian Cruise Line, and Puneet is dialing in from Berlin representing the pharma industry, who's currently at Roche. We'll go ahead and start with some questions to get the conversation going. And for our attendees, please feel free to enter any questions for the Q&A section that will come in about a half hour. So kicking off, as we all know around the globe, we just went through one of the biggest pandemics ever. How has content consumption changed for your industry compared to the before times? Anyone want to jump in, or I could go ahead and select you?
I can definitely start here. Coming into the pandemic, there was a real focus, especially since I'm in the e-commerce and the retail side, there was a huge focus on like omni-channel selling to consumers. And that kind of got taken away from us when the pandemic started. And there was really a focus then on content creation and content consumption, especially when we saw like platforms like TikTok kind of take off during the pandemic. We realized that there was a lot more shoppers were at home. So how do you get to them at home? And that was through digital content creation. So I really do think that it's kind of taken a larger piece of the pie than it was pre-pandemic.
Excellent. Puneet, I see you nodding your head along with the answer. How's it go for you over in Roche?
I'm basically, can you hear me okay?
Yep, all good.
Perfect. So I think I'm coming from pharma, so I'm going to give you a different perspective on a few things as well here. That's also my interest here, to actually learn from you all here and have some questions. So if I look at content consumption pattern, I think this, if you look at the industry, I think for content, we have seen this change happening in the last 3 to 5 years, that the content consumption pattern is already changing, right? I mean, people are, getting rid of, reading books to watching blinks, getting summaries of it from text to videos, or, people are looking for more snackable content. I think this was already happening. And when the pandemic came up, if I look at pharmaceuticals, we have basically, our model is that we have a very strong presence in our healthcare professionals' premises, that, hey, we go face to face, we do a lot of stuff face to face, and we communicate and give the content to them and have interaction with them. But the pandemic actually did not let us do that, because there was no access to that, or limited access to it. So I think what we have as in pharma, we need to come back and say, hey, how can I reach to the doctor in a remote environment? And so all our content basically, and doctors were looking for content because we have new molecules, new medicines coming out. They wanted more information. So we actually went into doing some remote, stuff and trying to create some materials on digital, etc. And the team has to actually come back and get into a mode of creating content which can be consumed by the doctor whenever they want and wherever they want. So that was basically kind of biggest shift. And all our print media, etc., taken a back seat, and we actually got into digital. And as you know, the pharma is still on a learning curve compared to other industries at the moment in terms of how to operate in the digital space to be the most effective, right? So that's what I see. And I think it's still, we are actually trying to get on the bus.
Interesting, Puneet. How are you reaching these doctors through the digital? I'm curious which platforms and how you're delivering that content.
And I think this is, we basically go, I mean, there are emails, which is basically, there's an email overload happened in the pandemic times. And we basically are now trying to actually respect the healthcare professional and also restricting on those emails, except not that every email should go to everyone. We're trying to personalize that aspect. There are websites which we are actually ramping it up so that, you get your more and more content, which is more personalized. There are recommendations coming on that. Then we are going into text and social, basically. So, we are trying to leverage all these spaces and trying to, there's a very common term in the pharma space called omni-channel, that we are not just going multi-channel, that all channels, whatever we want to do, but trying to orchestrate those channels. And that's where basically the pandemic has started. And I think that's the future, that we have to get into digital and face-to-face.
Excellent. Thanks. Jim, are you seeing that over in the public sector with what you're doing? It's a little bit different than what Navi and Puneet discussed, but I see you nodding as well.
Yes, this is actually a really interesting topic because the needs within the International Monetary Fund and the service to the 190 member countries does present a big challenge at least twice a year when we have our annual meetings and then the spring meetings. Typically, for the past 76 years, the representatives and delegates from these nations would then come to Washington, D.C., and they really have many in-person discussions. So when the pandemic hit, how are we going to still facilitate? So it put a tremendous amount of pressure on our production team. We have an in-house studio, but to be able to ramp up all that content and deliver something that is hybrid, truly hybrid, so people who are joining can actually contribute. So that was a big need to be able to try to provide as close or the best experience that we could for the member countries during the pandemic, right?
Excellent. And Marie, with your audience, your consumers, not taking many cruises during the pandemic, but I think everyone's rushing out these days for holiday. How are you seeing a shift in the content consumption?
It was interesting. Everything was shut down. And, back actually when, 2020 hit, I was in hospitality. So I just went from one thing that was shut down to another thing that was shut down. But I think it's, so what happened is that we changed, the content had to change. The ships were docked. So what we did was there was a lot of, how do we get that vacation feel to the consumer without actually letting them go on a vacation? There were virtual cooking classes with the chefs and, videos where you can kind of see, this is what it looks like outside. You're not there, but this is what it looks like. And then the past year or so, it's really been, all right, we've got our last ship back out into the water. And now the narrative is different. It's like, it's safe to come out. We have to reassure people that everything's okay and it's safe and we're taking the necessary precautions. And as the regulations soften and lessen, now it's like, I feel like it's another phase. Like we've hit that, okay, we've reassured people are coming, the ships are loaded, it's going well. And now we're going into, okay, so how do we keep that feeling going and let people enjoy? I think there are a lot of initiatives that were done during COVID and a lot of content that was created that I think could be really useful later on. And so right now it's just, what does that look like? But I think we've hit a good groove. I think, people are back to where things are going in rebrands and things like that. So I'm excited. Let's see what's going on. But the content itself is going back to what it was pre-pandemic. Yeah. But I think there can be a twist, right? There can be a twist. And I think the way people take the content too is different, especially as someone mentioned TikTok, how do we use these other things that came up to benefit us? So we'll see.
I think, Steph, if you allow me, I just want to add, I can relate to what you're saying, Maria, that we have to also help our healthcare facilities, to doctors and the hospital, that to tell the patient that it is safe to come for your diagnostics, because patients were they were scared of coming to hospitals, that they will catch COVID. And this actually delayed their treatments, which is negatively affecting them. Imagine somebody with a stage 2 and he does not get diagnosed on time. It's the chances of survival actually gets even much more minimal, right? So we have to actually make an effort to bring people for better diagnostic or right on time diagnostic so that they can come and get diagnosed. we did a lot of effort in order to bring that stuff on the table. So.
Definitely.
Excellent. Very interesting. Thank you. Moving on, we've all spoken about the Great Resignation or the Great Reset or whatever part of the globe you're in. You have your phrase for it. How are you all? Are you finding that you're struggling with retaining talent? How are you retaining? How are you bringing on new talent? Is that an issue still for your area? Navi, I'll tee over to you first.
Yeah, sounds good. I mean, in the past few years, it's been difficult, even before the pandemic, with creatives in general, right? Creatives have a lot of options, and they have a lot of industries that they can work in, right? They're kind of universal. They can kind of go anywhere. And so because of that, it's generally hard to retain talent, especially now when it's hybrid work and there's a lot more options for them where they can kind of work from anywhere for anyone. I've seen just a shift in how creatives are coming in. And then that also leads to issues with where we're having some of the biggest issues is like retaining production talent. A lot of people don't want to do production work. And so, a lot of creatives want to do the more kind of exciting creative direction, right? Or art direction. And so that's where we're having a little bit of a harder time. But that's, I guess, where offshore partners and everything come in. So that's how it's been over here.
Excellent. Puneet, again, I see you nodding your head.
I think
I
totally agree to Navi's point. Yes, retaining talent, if it's a good one, it's a topic. I think the pharma where I'm in and the colleagues within pharma I talk to outside my own company, I think the problem we are actually having is to actually find out the right model to actually deliver to the growing demands of the customers, because I think we still have not gone to a stage that is it the in-house, offshore, hybrid, what is the right model looks like. And we have also some requirements come for disease areas that, hey, for neuroscience, it's kind of be slightly different compared to oncology space where rare diseases, there's a different content need comes up. So I think our challenge is even to actually find out the right model. We are testing few things and making sure that we are actually getting there. Now, having done that, there's another challenge comes up. How do you actually constantly improve? Because there's a very strong pressure comes up that, hey, you are X million euros in terms of operating costs. How do you optimize? And why? Because there is a very strong understanding that, your production, you need to actually optimize things because there's a technology impact. So imagine a typical translation cost we used to pay 70 cents a few years ago. Now it's 10 cents because the technology can help you to go for machine translation plus human intervention. So, these things are basically even more challenging than retaining talent. That how do you keep pace with this new tech coming up and impacting the industry and making sure that you're up to speed with that. So.
Excellent. Maria, you finding these similar challenges in your studio?
Yes and no. So when we post something, people apply. They want to come work in cruising, which was surprising because I thought, after everything that's happened, maybe people would be weary. But, I was there. So whatever, I stayed. So, hey, but I think what it is, it's a lot of, we have to change the way we talk about it. We have to talk about culture now more than anything. So I think that's a big shift that we've been doing, is trying to say, okay, we may not pay the most, but what can we offer you that would make you want to come into the office? Because we go into the office 4 days a week. So, there's one day from home, and a lot of people, they have more options than that, like Navi said. So it's really just, we're setting that up. We have the culture talks. We want to make sure that our mission, vision, and our values are there in place, and we can talk well about the company. And I think, I laughed when Navi was talking about production, because no one does want to do production. Everyone wants to have the big ideas and the big designs. And so we kind of don't really have like a production squad, and that's where the production houses come in, because we want everyone to have that opportunity. And I think that's a selling point. So it's like a yes and no. We have applicants and we review and, everything's going on. But once you get to that point, it's like, what else can we offer you besides, since we can't offer you like fully remote, what else have we got going that would make you want to, come stay with us? But so far so good. The folks that are around, they're great, and they've stuck with us, so it's good.
Awesome. And what about you, Jim, over in your studio? You have quite a large team. Challenges there as well?
Yeah, our it's kind of refreshing to hear everyone talking about this, because our challenges are, everybody wants to say that, or we all think that our challenges are unique to us, but definitely when inside the IMF, it's almost like it's its own world. So we do have 3 different tiers of staffing, basically, and there's different rules that apply to those, but for the most part, IMF has been incredibly flexible with remote work. And then I think now they have a minimum of 2 days in per week. And that's only if you are considered staff or contractual. If you are a vendor employee and you can work remotely, then you can still do that. So that's a huge benefit. So we haven't seen, a loss of really staffing, really. In many cases, not specifically in our department, but across the fund, we've seen an increase in hires. And the other challenge that we have specifically for creative is that, myself included, many people don't know that there is an in-house creative team at IMF. And then when you find that out, typically the first thing you do is go to the website and start looking at what they're doing. But what you don't know is that there are content creators across the fund. So I am, a senior creative director within our creative team, but we are not the only content creators. So it gets a little challenging when it comes to other aspects of brand. But anyway, retention's been good.
Interesting. So it's nice to see, the theme about all of your creatives. They want to be working on the big ideas, and they don't want to be doing the pixel perfect production or the content at scale. So can you all speak to me a little bit about, what areas are you investing in for that content at scale? Are you using technology? Are you using offshoring? Are you using partners? How are you addressing this to keep your creatives, retain their happiness, but get all the work done? Puneet, I'll jump over to you. Oh, I have you on mute.
I think we are trying multiple things at the moment, and multiple initiatives going on, leveraging tech, basically. The major thing what we are actually doing at the moment is trying to find the right balance between a model where we say we have got an offshore partner, we have got an in-house team available, and of course there are some people who can actually respond very quickly to some urgent request or something like that. So at the moment, my focus is that, hey, what's that balance looks like, not just giving everything to an offshore partner who comes up and delivers something where there are, of course, cost efficiencies, etc., comes up, but there's also significant stricter guidance and guardrails required to actually get things delivered on time. At the same time, here I basically we have identified a few locations inside Europe and Latin America where we would like to actually build up some of our in-house capabilities to make sure that we deliver something with proper accountability and making sure that we are matching the needs of the customers.
Excellent. And what about you, Marie? I know you're putting out a lot of content. You have quite a few promotions and new ships coming out. How are you finding the balance and the investment for the production side of things?
I think it's funny, when I first started, we weren't using a production house so much for the creative. So in-house is that balance. It's tricky because you have, let's say we have all these retail sales, we have these campaigns that come up, and maybe now that we're in-house and we are the agency of record, all of that work is coming to us. And so using the production house has been really helpful because it allows us to be able to scale for these last minute projects. We keep the last minute projects with us because those are so fast and furious, but we use the production houses for these retail sales, for these things that happen consistently, that we know what they're going to look like for the most part. We have to design and get it all done. So I think that partnership has really been helpful. A few years ago, it was get an in-house agency, they're going to save you money. And once everyone saw the benefit, then they got inundated, right? We all got inundated, like, oh, all the work is now coming to us and we've got to deliver in shortened amount of time, because they're like, oh, the in-house has got it. They don't need a month, so we'll give them 2 weeks and we'll see what happens. And so you get it done and everyone loves you and they send you more work. And then that's how you become popular, but also that's when you need more support. So I think that partnership is really helpful, and it allows us to do those quicker initiatives that we can't do while still keeping the regular work that we have to get done moving.
A little bit of be careful what you wish for, huh?
Exactly. They love us, but now, okay, now what? What do we do?
Exactly. Jim, how's things over in your studio with the overflow? I think you do more original and less volume, if I'm not mistaken. So, are you partnering with other companies for that work?
So yeah, in the early stages of the pandemic, we were definitely offshoring. We explored offshoring creative content production, as well as offshoring, if you want to say, asset collection, right? So photography, B-roll, all of those things that we would typically make or use to make a higher quality production. And I think our experience is not surprising, and it's something that I think when you think about like the strategic kind of creative industry of advertising and PR and everybody who's in media marketing, like we all struggle with the same thing, which is like, on one hand, if a creative director gets the project organized enough so that they can actually hand it off, why would I not do it myself, right? Like I've already done a huge amount of lifting. At IMF, we started to see that offshoring for those kind of secondary assets is a huge help, and we continue to do that. Because we also want content that is relevant to the audiences in those different places. So it's important that we have assets from around the world. But as far as creative strategy and final execution, we are more familiar with the standards that we're trying to hit. And it ends up being faster rather than going back and forth with revisions, as if we basically try to creative direct that ourselves.
Great. And Navi, I see you nodding as well with everything Jim's saying. This is our experience, I assume.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think at Wish less. I think at Wish, I'm fairly brand new at Wish, so we're still trying to kind of figure out the kinks. And just like Jim, I'm not the only content creation team there. So like I'm responsible for my kind of own ecosphere, you know what I mean? And so, but at everywhere else I've kind of been in the past few years, what I've seen is actually having secondary assets be created by production houses actually helps the team. So they get to do the heavier lifting of the actual creative direction, right? And actually come up with that. And then I've always been in fast e-com. So we've always had like a quick turnaround. Sometimes it's like hours. So you need a production workhouse to kind of help provide those assets quicker than our internal team. And it's also protecting your internal team. So like I've come up from like a project management role. So for me, it's always been about protecting my working team. And so for me, it's like, how do you protect your in-house team when production kind of offshore teams have teams all over the world? So they are able to kind of quickly turn around things for you when your internal team is struggling. And so how do you make that happen? So that's where we really, I've always used a hybrid approach everywhere I've kind of been doing creative ops. And we've always kept kind of the bigger ideas in-house and then taken the secondary production assets offshore. And so that's why I was agreeing with Jim a lot, because our team really enjoys doing like the big creative kind of idea work, right? But then nobody really likes doing the production assets when you have to create 60 assets off of one, and especially localization, right, is a big thing. And so it's easier to do that offshore.
And Navi, I'm going to segue into our next question is, how are you seeing your traditional creative agencies partnering with both your in-house and then your production, or are these things still decoupled? Are you working on different, yeah?
I think everywhere I've gone, it's been siloed until I get there. I really do believe in having one team. Like especially right now in the remote, like in this remote lifestyle, like Wish is 100% remote. Every company I've been at ever since the pandemic, it's been 100% remote. So for me, I like to establish those relationships, a full cycle relationship, even with our offshore partners. Like I always push my offshore partners to attend some of the meetings that they can based on their time zone, and actually to meet the internal creatives and and vice versa. So they can establish those relationships. Because one of the biggest things that you have happen is sometimes your production or your offshore partners don't really get your creative vision, right? And then you're having to revise over and over again. But if you establish those relationships and you actually get them up on like Slack, if you're using Slack or like whatever you're using, and you're able to have those back and forths quickly and establish those relationships, it's a lot better. And so for me, I don't like to work in silos. I like for everybody to kind of be working together as one team.
Wonderful. And Marie, what about over with your team and your agency of record and in-house and production? How does that all flow between original creation and production?
I agree completely with Navi. It's never there. Like creative ops is not every creative ops role I've had. It's always been the first time the role has been there. So it's always siloed, and then they bring you in specifically to figure out a way to do it, to make sure everyone's talking to each other and what that looks like. So every time I start, they're like, what do you do exactly? And I'm like, I'm just trying to make sure everyone's talking to each other and everything's getting done. And, we're building these bridges where we need to build them. So that's the goal, right? So I won't say we're there yet because I am still fairly new to it. It's been this year, but I will say strides are being made, but at the beginning, they're always, the people doing the work aren't really thinking about the end of it, like how many hundreds of assets, correction, they know how many hundreds of assets we have to get done, because usually they have to do it, but they're not thinking about, that production strategies, like what else we can be doing that could take the burden off of them. So that's what ops is here for. So, it's getting there. We want it coupled. So that's it.
You're moving in the right direction. And Jim, what about over at the IMF?
So yes, the idea of like traditional, or I guess siloed practice areas is something that is a challenge at times. I think if we are going to be the most agile or the fastest performing with the best creative teams, we need to be working together in smaller teams that bring different skill sets together. So I guess to be specific, sometimes when we're going into agencies, and I'm kind of guessing also with like what Maria was talking about, but it's like, this is the designer group, and this is this group, and this is this group, and they all do their own projects, or they're pieces of those projects when they come through. But one of the things I'm specifically trying to do at IMF to elevate the quality, the production value of the creative is at the very beginning, I'm like, I want to know what editor I have, what producer am I working with, and who's the designer that is going to dedicate most of their time to this above other things, because that's the only way we're going to make it work. So breaking down those barriers and helping people there understand that it's okay. I know we've been working this one way for a while, right? But you have to trust me that this is going to give us something better in the end. And we've been successful on specific projects, but it's, with the IMF, it's a big ship, and you have to definitely network to make people feel like these changes are beneficial to everyone.
Mm-hmm. Get those change makers internally. Puneet, how's it over at Roche?
So, if you could have asked this question a few years ago, we could have said, we don't know what creative and production, my agency manages everything. So that kind of approach we had, a few years ago, because there was everything was driven by one agency and they actually do the rest, and there was hardly any understanding. But pharma, I think, have learned their lessons in the last 4 or 5 years. They have actually created roles on content which actually understands the difference and actually trying to challenge what can be done. So I think in my world, what we have done is that we really respect the creative side, that yes, you need a high-end creative where you actually sit down with the brands and talk about, hey, what's the next big campaign you would like to launch? But then we have actually decoupled it significantly, where we are saying there's a creative repurpose, we call it. And the creative repurpose is basically from the creative, what is coming out, you have a possibility to actually repurpose those content a lot, create variations and all. That's a second set of team we are talking about. And then come the production, where we have a different expertise. So yes, we have 3 different pillars, and we have 3 different skill set required in those pillars, where we are actually working on this. And that actually is basically our strategy going forward, that we would like to actually keep the high-end creative, yes, keep giving us the new stuff, what's basically the next thing looks like, but the rest is all about repurposing and production.
So on that point, Puneet, about the creative repurposing, I'm going to go into the next question. How do you ensure that brand messaging is consistent and personalized across all of the regions that you're going to? Are you capturing data? Is it a challenge? How are you ensuring that it's all staying true to the original messaging?
Yeah. And I think it's a great question. If I ask my colleagues in pharma, we are all struggling that, hey, how do you actually control that messaging across 140 markets, across those things? I think there is a very strong desire to have a consistent messaging, but it also comes up that, hey, how is our tech enabled? Because if you look at the manual way to control those messages, etc., it's not. So I think there's a significant investment going on from our side to make sure that the technology is backing up those measures, where if I actually produce 20 pieces of content, they have the similar messages, they differ in terms of the local nuances, that making sure that, yes, it is acceptable in that market, but we need a tech support. So we are investing a lot in the technology space, which actually allows us to do that. If you say, are you actually consistent across 130 markets? I would say, I think I'll get mixed answers from my own company. So,
Fair enough. And what about you, Navi, at Wish? How are you approaching that?
I mean, it's hard. So the brands that I've kind of, since I'm brand new to Wish, the brands that I've kind of come from before, like eBay, Sephora, or like HubSpot was my most recent right before. They are all big brand players, right? They had it down. Like there was consistency. We had like a creative direction. We had a creative director team that managed. They kind of like looked at it from an eagle eye and was able to even globally for eBay, look at it overall. Currently at Wish, we're all spread out. And so I'm in charge of the influencer marketing. And so when I first came in, I'm like, okay, so what's the brand team doing so we can kind of mimic it? Nobody really asked that question before, which I was kind of surprised about, And so I'm like, I want to, well, what is your timeline? When are you going to market holidays? When are you going to market any of these kind of moments? And I finally got a calendar and I'll start, mimicking it. But right now I'm still trying to make those kind of relationships, as Jim mentioned in the last question, in the last answer, like relationship building is number one, getting people like evangelized almost to like, being more brand conscious, being more creative operations conscious is kind of where I'm at right now. And so there isn't any consistency, and we are spread out across all markets. And so I think we just had a big rebrand, and I think like that's supposed to bring more consistency, but it won't happen until everyone's talking to each other. And that's not happening right now. So.
And Jim, I assume a little bit's happening over at the IMF.
Yes. So I'm smiling and nodding, and I'm also thinking how can I say what might come across differently in a way that's doesn't sound so I don't know, frustrated. But so IMF is an old institution. It's been around a while, and it shouldn't be surprising that I think the ways that we work were established at a time before technology as we know it today existed. And it's probably not the only organization that is trying to transition, right? And the bigger you are, some people would say the slower it moves. And it really depends on advocacy, especially within international organizations or multinational organizations. You have to have buy-in at the very top tiers in order to make things happen quickly. So that direct line to authority when it comes to even brand governance is critical. And that is something that we are working towards. But the way that we are structured, our creative solutions group is actually in a different department than the communications department. So when you talk about silos within our team and then silos within our organization, we have to really cross over in order to help people kind of work together.
Keeps coming back to communication over over communicating. Marie, how's things over at NCL?
I will say that the pandemic allowed the team to be able to centralize creative reviews. Like we've been able, don't get me wrong, there are still things that get past us, but we have creative representation in every office. And so we're able to review the work coming through. So everything is very consistent from what I've seen. And there's work that, like I said, there's work that gets through that is not consistent. But I think the pandemic allowed us, getting rid of a lot of the agencies allowed us, like Jim was saying, we have access to leadership now, and leadership reviews the work, and we have that ear. So it's really helpful to get everyone consistent. And we see ourselves as the brand protectors, right? When we create something, if someone wants something big and fancy and loud, and we're like, that's great, and we can do that within these guidelines that it needs to be consistent. So it's kind of like a joke now. Like every time we that's not consistent, that's not what we are. We need to change that. So I think the team's done a really good job, but there's always room to improve. And I think there's some things that I see that we're like, oh no, who did this? Where did this come from? But besides that, it's like pretty good.
Yeah. Excellent. And it sounds like a few of you have touched on it, especially Jim, I'll start with you. You mentioned that you're starting to dip your toe in technology, and Puneet as well. Where are you all seeing automation? Are you seeing that as a guide to help ensure the global consistency, to deliver the scalable content? Like, what sort of technology and automation are you all investing in these days, or looking to invest down the road for your content production?
Yeah, so automation is something that we are interested in, and it's something that has been discussed widely at the fund, and I think that it is still trying to understand how we might use it. Is kind of where we are, based on the type of content that we are making, whether it's like a quick example would be, we have a PhD economist that writes a blog post, and then that blog post gets turned into a long form video, kind of like a consumer-friendly analysis of what's going on. And then that analysis video, we would then cut up and break that down into smaller pieces of content. So with that sort of flow, it takes a lot of human power, I think, to do those things correctly. So we're open to ideas on where we can use AI and automation. Other practices would be even for like refining the language that we're using online. So, I think we've probably are all aware of like AI scripting or the automated language and typing and those sorts of things I think could be helpful, but we are still exploring.
Excellent. What about you, Puneet? Are you dabbling in automation now?
I think the technology is evolving much faster than we can adopt, actually. So I remember my time at Bayer when I was working there. We were using softwares like eWizard, V7 to do plug and play model where the marketeers can do things themselves. Now we are actually jumping on technologies which can actually create your video from a script immediately. So within avatars and all. So these things are basically helping us to actually produce more video content, right? Instead of, going for shoots or something. And this is very close to real. We also have examples where we are actually injecting, I think I saw a question on the chat that, hey, do you actually inject technology in your production workflow? Yes. We actually try to include some technologies which actually check the quality of the content with an AI-enabled softwares, which actually tell you, hey, if you put a button here or a button there, it will be more effective compared to the others. And these are some things available. And I think technology is the way to go, which will help us to actually, do more things at less. So we have multiple of these topics ongoing at the moment.
What about you, Navi and Maria? You all adopting any technology or automation now?
Yeah, we're actually in probably the same boat as Puneet. Like for us, we have influencer content. So that's another kind of hurdle where we have third parties creating a lot of content for us. And we're thinking about using that in paid ads. But how do you audit? Like right now, our influencer program, we want it to be in the thousands. So how does a team of 5, which is what we are, audit the actual content that's created by these third-party creators? And so we're looking into some automation to kind of help check, do an initial check of the content. And then also, since we're quick turnaround retail, we do have to give a lot of power to our marketers to create kind of these hero banners for websites. And so how do you really do that? We've been surprisingly enough, leaning into Canva a lot. And I know Canva is like more consumer based, but Canva makes it really easy for designers to load in images like layer by layer. And then our marketers are kind of able to pick what they want it to look like and then put in their own kind of, put in whatever they want it to say and then pick out of a approved images list. You know what I mean? So we're still able to kind of keep it what we want it to be, and they're not able to use anything outside of the package that we've given them. And so we've been using that a lot for our marketer, or for actually giving our stakeholders more power to create their own assets as well.
Excellent. And Marie, anything over at NCL?
No, not yet. I think we're testing. There are a few automations that we are testing. I don't have visibility into what the video team is doing in terms of automation, but I know, our media team is looking at ways where we can change content live based on what those numbers are, how they're performing, right? So I think there are things going on right now that will help in the long run, but also there's that, we're brand protectors. So, when they come and they ask us, do you think we should do this? We're like, great, do it, but we want to look at it. We need to see what's being put out, because there's still that level of control that we want to make sure that it's not automating something completely off the rails. And then, building templates. I feel like if we're going to automate, then we can build some templates that can be used in that system. However, it's going to be used, so at least there's a guide. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, some really great conversation. I'm just looking at the time. I'm cutting into Anil's lightning hour. But let's just take a question from the audience. I'm going to take a look. Were there any that popped out? This one's a good one. Tips for optimizing the briefing process for internal and outsourced. This is specifically for writers, but I think it could relate to really any external partner that you're working on.
Yeah, we rely heavily on project management tools to kind of help guide the process. So they've come so far, like even in my career, like I've seen so many changes in project management tools. And like currently our briefing process is an actual form. And the form is like, if yes, then this, right? So then basically when marketers are filling in their requests, if it's a certain type of request, it'll open up a whole set of panel of questions. If it's not, then it'll, you know what I mean? Then it won't ask those extra questions. And it's such a long form, but when I tell you that I get all the information that I need from everybody that needs it, that I'm able to hand it off to the production or my offshore agency without even having to review it. Like that's how optimized it's become. So I think and I've used that in multiple companies. So I think like really relying on your project management tool instead of doing like a Word document helps, because you can kind of dictate what they can I see that there's a follow-up about what those project management tools. So we use Workfront currently, but there's so many different ones out there, but Workfront really has forms. And then that form spits out a task on the actual board. So it's like already ready. And then your project managers or your creative ops team, whoever it is, can go ahead and assign and do whatever they need in the tool. But Workfront is what I've used actually in quite a few places. And that's how we've seen the briefing process just become really easy.
One more question I just want to squeeze in before we hand it over to Anil, which some of these questions came in pre-event. A lot around how are you working with and identifying and vetting your DEI partners? I know that a lot of agencies, this is required for your agency partners. What is the process that you're currently going through to find the right partner, to vet them, to just make sure that the culturally fit is there?
Yeah, I can take this one again as well. So I don't think it's super sophisticated, the process of DEI right now. I think like we're still kind of figuring it out, right? But just when you're doing an RFP for a vendor, what I typically do is just I look at their content, I look at their partner content. So if they're like partnering with a different brand like Nike or something, I'll take a look at it, see what kind of images they're using, right? To see if it's only if it's showing DEI there. I also will look at who's actually running the company. So I'll go through like LinkedIn and like just take a look and see what kind of content they're producing. And I think that's really important. Like when we were doing an RFP recently, we noticed that most of the content that was coming out was didn't have anybody that was brown or Black in their images. It was all just white people. And we're like, well, I guess we can't use them, because if they're not comfortable working with people of color, then it makes it really hard. So it's a hard topic to have within companies, right? On like what those parameters are. So I think it's just what is comfortable for everyone.
Excellent. Thank you for that. I could speak on this topic for hours with you all, but I'm going to hand you over to Anil now for a moment.
Wonderful. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Stef. Yeah, hugely fascinating. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through?
Yes.
Wonderful. Great stuff. I knew Stef would only leave me 10 minutes exactly, so I'm going to try and rush through. So this is sort of a lightning round. It's a way, just for our audience, for a way of us getting a little bit more invaluable insight from our wonderful panelists today. We have 10 minutes. We have 3 questions, which you can do the maths or the math, depending on where you are in the world. 60 seconds for each response, if possible. And then hopefully we'll get through as many of these 3 questions as we can. So, so let's get going. So the first question, so many companies, of course, are leading with culture now, leading with purpose. And we'd like to know how hybrid working has affected how you as business leaders can create and develop a company culture, and any tips that you may have for our audience where hybrid working and company culture have come together and it's been beneficial for your specific teams. So let's kick off with Marie.
Great. Like I mentioned earlier, culture is really important, and I think we are the internal agency, and the company has. The company is great, and the company has their benefits, everything like that, but we try to focus on internally, what do we provide for our team? Leadership also has really helped with saying, we're not remote, we're in office 4 days a week, but we know there's a life to be lived. If you have doctor's appointments, if your kids are home from school, if you've got something going on, work from home that day. So it's not rigid, and I think that really helps when they hear you have to come in 4 days, like if something's going on, you don't have to be there, as well as just how we interact with each other and how we balance, how we respect the work-life balance and what we're doing. So I think all of those, we have senior leadership telling us this information, which is great that we can pass on, and we can build that culture for our team saying, hey, everything might not be perfect the way you want it, but there are other things that we're able to offer. And I think just how we work with each other and, the benefits and everything like that. I'm trying to go really fast.
Yeah, well, fast is good. I'm sure. Again, I think it's such an important topic, but we have 10 minutes, and we'll see where we get to. So, Jim, perhaps I can come to you next in terms of the IMF.
Sure. So this is interesting. Culture within, I'll start within our creative team, which is, we're under 100 people, but it sounds like a lot, but we're more around like the 50 to 60 mark. So one of the things that I think has been beneficial with hybrid is just the platforms that we have started using for creative sharing and ideation in that environment. So like Mural is a huge asset. Like it's basically, if you don't know, it's basically a gigantic whiteboard that everyone can join, and you can use it to hold your notes, or you can use it to present, or you can use it to brainstorm. And it basically was set up for design thinking. So, it has automated virtual sticky notes that you can use. So what we've done is kind of use that, and then also understanding that creating culture is something that doesn't always happen during working hours. It's something that you typically would build outside of that. So we created a event called like a big share, where the whole point is to have crowdsourced within our team content, where they bring something, they have 2 minutes to talk about it, and then we have a quick discussion. So it also shows us more about what that person is interested in based on that theme that I've provided them. And that
I love that. That's wonderful. Yeah, that's a really good way of sort of sharing and allowing people to sort of express themselves, both remotely and coming together. How about Navi? What's happening at Wish in terms of culture?
Yeah, definitely. I think in terms of culture, we try to do something very similar to Jim as well, but we focus on what people are doing outside of work. So it's really kind of cool. Like everyone kind of does something outside of work, and they're able to kind of bring it in and talk about it. So you don't get to only see the person, because we're 100% remote. So you don't only get to see the person with what they are. So like, an operations manager, you get to see that, oh, Navi's like a mom, and she's like, and she also runs, like makes music videos and like all this kind of stuff. And people, they get to see like more facets of a person. And I think that's really important. In terms of actually being able to retain and attract talent, there's a lot of design and creative talent in South America, and being able to be 100% remote lets you kind of attract talent from other markets as well. And then you can build a culture. It's actually really cool. We do recipe exchanges too, where we talk about the different, our favorite foods from where we are. And that's kind of cool. We all try to make it and see if it, see if we all succeed or not. So that's always fun.
Wonderful. My children would love that. They love to cook.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. And Puneet, how about Roche?
Fan of basically hybrid working, and my team is spread across the globe, basically, most in Europe and then Asia and also Latin America. So I think this is working very well. The thing which I am still trying to learn, that how can we actually in this hybrid model still respect the time zone, the availability, how do we manage those meetings? There are 6 people in the meeting room, 2 remotely, and I think this model is still evolving, I would say. And how this will look like in 6 months, 12 months time, I don't know. But I think the culture at Roche is basically, the location is history, basically. Geography is history, they call it. So, you can sit wherever you are, but you are still able to work. So I recruited people in UK, etc., just to get it on the team. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a microcosm, this panel, in fact, of some of the challenges that one has around time zones. And that's something that we're reading a lot about at the moment. It's how do we, as you say, respect those time zones. So, okay, moving on to question number 2. We're almost halfway through. So in what ways do you think augmented reality, virtual reality, extended reality in the world of meta will change the way people consume content? And are you seeing an active shift in budgets to those type of emerging technologies? And I think I'll start with Navi this time.
Yeah. So, so right before Wish, I was at HubSpot, and we were really focusing on AR, VR, especially with our events. The first year I joined, they do a huge event called Inbound, and there was no way we could do it in person. So how do you bring more immersive kind of technology around it? And we actually created, you had your own avatar, you could like walk around, experience different things. I think that's the beginning, right? I think that's the beginning of going into this AR, VR. And I think that that's important. I also think that companies are going to start investing more, because consumers are going to want to actually consume content in that space. And so how do you create content that can work in that space. Like I think Sotheby's did like their own, they did a whole auction in the metaverse. And I think that's the future.
Yeah, very cool. Yes, I remember reading about that as well. Okay, wonderful. And Puneet, how about the pharma?
Pharma, I would say we are slow here in terms of AR/VR. There was a phase when we were quite aggressive, but we are exploring with some experiment that, hey, how can we actually improve the patient education, disease area awareness with AR/VR? We have some kind of initiatives going on a pilot basis that, hey, can a patient learn about the disease and side effects and the dosing information via AR/VR things? But it's still not scaled up, I would call it. There are certain instances, but there is a investment appetite, but still has not, one of the one area that AR/VR and things want to change. It's like a wait, watch and see moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sort of like there'll be some leaders, and then you guys can follow through. And as you say, although the investment's hopefully being made available, which is important. So, and Jim, International Monetary Fund,
yes,
business.
Yeah, we so I mentioned already, we do have a full broadcast studio at headquarters, and use that and many other places for creating content. But what we don't have is a lot of room for storing anything. So when it comes down to like set direction or art direction, we have like what we would call a prop closet, but it's just kind of, a very small space. But anyway, what does like extended reality kind of give us? Do we need less props, right? We were just in LA talking with a company about this specifically, and it's an amazing experience. For those that I'm just going to pull up this photo. It's ridiculous. I have to show you. It's basically you're standing, if you can see this.
Oh yes,
yeah, you're standing on the screen.
And, oh right, okay.
So the screen's behind you and it's on the floor. And we are thinking like a lot of times with annual meetings, we would travel to a different location. So could we bring that location here and then reduce those travel costs, right?
Yeah. Virtual production, again, I think there's probably a whole other topic there that we can talk about in a subsequent session. And finally, Marie, Norwegian, AR/VR.
Toes have been dipped into the AR pool, like there's an appetite we're seeing. I don't think it's something that's happening like aggressively right now, especially since I don't know what that cost looks like. So I don't know if it's a benefit or a hindrance, but we did a DM. It was very nice, award-winning. It was good. It was like AR right. DM, and you could click and you could tour one of the new ships. And I think not only did it look good, but I think it helped the consumer see something that you got to go to a port to see a ship. Before I worked here, I'd never even seen a ship up close. So it's really it's beneficial. And I think it really helps. So toes.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's true utility, I think, of the technology available. That's great to see. I'll check that out actually. So I've got 10 seconds. I want one-word answers if possible for the third question. And it does lend itself to one-word answers. Do you think we'll become too inundated with content to the point when it has no meaningful impact on consumers? Navi?
I think we're already getting to that point.
Already at that point. Puneet?
Yes.
Yes. Marie?
I agree with Navi.
And Jim?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's already overwhelming.
Wow. Okay, that's a great way to close off. Thank you so much. I'm going to hand back to Stef and she can close the session.
Thank you all so much, Marie, Jim, Navi, Puneet. Excellent conversation. Jotted down a couple of themes, takeaways for the audience today, based on that last question as well. It's snackable content. Let's get quick, get to where our audience is, a la TikTok. Love the comments and the discussion around ensuring consistency by building relationships with your internal and your external teams. That's going to help you ensure success with everything you do. And tech and automation is the future, even though we don't quite know what that looks like today. It's on the roadmap. So really great conversation. Like I said, I could speak for hours more, but we're now 1 minute over. So thank you all so much for your time. For our audience members, if you want your voice heard, we do have a benchmark report. There's going to be a QR code that's going to pop up on the screen. Lend your voice, take part in the survey. Maybe Anil will follow up with you to dive more into that. But thank you all so much for your time. Really great conversation.